Okay, let's think about this for a second. Imagine a technology, maybe the technology, that built civilizations, recorded our biggest achievements, our deepest thoughts, but it can also just fade away, disappear completely.
It's a powerful thought, isn't it?
It really is. And that's what we're diving into today, the incredible journey of writing itself, its birth, how it changed, twisted, turned.
And yes, sometimes how it just died out.
Exactly. We've looked at some really interesting material exploring the forces behind these huge shifts and how we write things down.
Right. And our mission here, so to speak, isn't just to list scripts on a timeline.
Yeah.
We want to dig into the why. Why did some writing systems take off? How did they evolve?
And why did some vanish?
Precisely. The fundamental reasons behind the story of written language.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning, the genesis.
Yeah.
What needs kicked off those first, scratches and symbols?
No, the interesting thing is the very earliest writing wasn't really about epic poems or great myths.
No. What was it then?
It was much more down-to-earth economics, record keeping.
Ah, okay.
As societies got more complex, they just needed reliable ways to track trade. Who owned what, goods changing hands.
Right, you can't keep all that in your head.
Exactly. Imagine trying to run even a simple early economy without noting down debts or property lines.
Yeah, chaos.
So early writing probably came directly out of that very practical need. Accounting, essentially. Property IDs.
So, less hero's journey, more early spreadsheets.
Yeah, you could say that, yeah. It's a surprisingly practical origin.
Okay, that makes sense for starting it. But how did it move beyond just, tracking goods? How did it spread?
Well, if you look at the bigger picture, the growth of political power was a huge factor.
Okay, power. How so?
As rulers started controlling larger areas, they needed ways to communicate laws, orders, manage things across distances.
Sure, can't just shout across an empire.
Right. Writing became this vital tool for administration, for managing these bigger territories.
Makes sense.
And sometimes it was very deliberate. You have examples like the Persian king Darius III.
Darius, what did he do?
He actually had Old Persian cuneiform developed that wedge-shaped script specifically to promote his rule, get his message out across the empire.
Wow. So commissioning a whole writing system for political reasons.
Yes. It shows how tied writing was to governance.
Okay, so we have economics, we have politics pushing it forward. What about culture, religion? Did they play a part?
Oh, absolutely. That's another crucial piece. The desire to preserve things, oral histories, religious texts, cultural knowledge.
Like sacred texts.
Exactly. Think about things like the Dead Sea Scrolls or the Egyptian Book of the Dead. These were vital. They needed a written form to survive, to be passed down accurately.
Right. You can't rely on memory alone for something that important.
Precisely. So the need to codify and share these core beliefs and stories was another big driver for using and spreading writing.
All right, so that explains the initial push and spread. But the symbols themselves, the way things were written, that didn't stay the same, did it?
Not at all. Writing systems are constantly evolving, or at least they were. And you see both internal factors and external forces pushing those changes.
Okay, let's break that down. What do you mean by internal drivers?
Internally, it's often about the system itself adapting. As societies developed more complex ideas, sometimes the writing system struggled to keep up.
Like trying to write abstract concepts.
Exactly. Early picture-based writing is great for cow or sun, but how do you draw belief or justice?
Good point. So how do they solve that?
One key development was something called the rebus principle.
Rebus, like those puzzles.
Sort of. It's using a symbol not for the thing it depicts, but for its sound to write another word that sounds the same.
Okay, give me an example.
Like maybe using a picture of your eye to represent the word I, or a picture of a bee for the verb be.
Ah, I get it. Using the sound of the symbol. That's clever.
It was a massive breakthrough. It allowed writing to express a much, much wider range of ideas, especially abstract ones.
Okay, so that's one internal change. Any others?
Yeah, there's also just a natural tendency towards making things simpler, more efficient.
Easier to learn, easier to use.
Right. If a script is incredibly complex and takes years to master, that limits its use. Simpler systems can spread more easily.
Makes sense.
We mentioned Darius's Old Persian cuneiform that was actually simpler than the older Mesopotamian cuneiform it was based on.
Oh, interesting.
And maybe the emergence of scripts like linear A and B in the Aegean, which used symbols for syllables, that might also reflect a need for more efficient record keeping than earlier systems.
Okay, efficiency. What else?
And you have to think about the physical side of things. What were they writing on?
The materials, like clay tablets.
Clay tablets, bone, ivory, these things definitely influence the shape of the characters.
How so?
Well, it's hard to make smooth, flowing curves if you're scratching into bone or pressing wedges into wet clay, right? Straight lines, angles, those are easier.
Right, so the very stuff they used shaped the letters, the symbols. Fascinating.
Definitely.
Okay, so those are internal drivers, complexity, efficiency, materials. What about those external forces you mentioned?
Well, some of them echo the reasons writing started in the first place. Economic changes, for example.
Like needing better records again.
Maybe more precise records or standardized records as trade gets more complex. That could push a system to adapt.
Okay.
Politics, too. Imagine managing an empire with lots of different spoken languages.
Yeah, tricky.
You might need to adapt your script or maybe even adopt a new one to govern effectively.
Right.
And probably one of the biggest external forces is just cultural exchange. Societies meeting, trading, sometimes conquering. They borrow ideas.
Including writing systems.
Absolutely. Borrowing and adapting writing systems from neighbors or influential cultures happened all the time, and that sparks further change, new evolutions.
It really paints a picture of writing as something dynamic, constantly interacting with the society around it.
It really is. It's not static at all.
But, as we said at the start, this journey also includes endings. Scripts disappear. What causes that? Why does the ink fade?
Yeah, the decline and death of writing systems, it's quite striking. And while internal issues like a script becoming too cumbersome might play a small part,
It's mostly external.
overwhelmingly, yes. It's usually driven by big shifts in the political and social world.
Political shifts, like regime change.
Exactly. Major political upheaval can directly lead to a script being changed or even totally abandoned.
Can you give a strong example of that?
A really clear and impactful one is Turkey in the early 20th century. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk.
Right, the founder of modern Turkey.
Yes. He spearheaded the replacement of the Arabic-based Ottoman script, which had been used for centuries,
With what?
with a new alphabet based on Latin letters.
Wow. Why?
It was a very deliberate political act. Part of modernizing Turkey, secularizing it, aligning it more closely with Europe. The old script was tied to the Ottoman past, the Caliphate.
And the new script symbolized a break from that, a new direction.
Precisely. It shows how deeply tied a writing system can be to a nation's identity and political orientation. Changing the script was changing a fundamental symbol of the state.
That's incredible. So a change in power can literally erase a way of writing.
It can. It shows how vulnerable scripts can be to these larger forces.
Are there other external factors besides direct political replacement?
Oh, yes. Broader social and cultural changes are huge. If a script just doesn't meet the needs of a society anymore, economically, politically, culturally,
It just falls out of use.
it can, yeah. Especially if a more effective or, frankly, more convenient alternative comes along. Think about how digital tech is changing how much we use handwriting today, maybe even favoring certain styles.
Good point.
Also, sometimes the spoken language just evolves so much.
That it drifts too far from the way it's written.
Exactly. If the writing system becomes really awkward and doesn't reflect how people actually speak anymore, it can become obsolete. People might simplify it or eventually abandon it.
Makes sense.
And then, of course, there's conquest. A dominant culture imposing its own language and writing system can lead to the decline and eventual extinction of a local script.
It's quite sobering, really. We think of writing as so permanent, but it's really quite contingent on the society that uses it.
That's a great way to put it. Contingent. Vulnerable, even.
So if we try to sort of pull all these threads together,
Yeah.
what's the big takeaway about this whole life cycle of writing?
I think the core insight looking across history is just how deeply interconnected writing is with a society's fundamental needs.
Needs like
we discussed, the economic need for managing things, keeping track, the political need for governing, communicating laws and orders, and the cultural need expressing beliefs, recording history, sharing knowledge.
right, those three pillars.
Yeah, those needs are why societies create writing systems in the first place. They drive how those systems develop and change.
And sometimes when those needs shift dramatically, or the script no longer serves them,
That's when societies might let them go. Abandon them. It's this constant dance between the tool writing and the society using it.
so we've traced it from those first practical sparks, the accounting,
Through power and culture spreading it.
Right.
How internal cleverness, like the rebus principle, and external pressures shaped the symbols. And finally, how those big external shifts, especially political and social ones, can lead to its decline and disappearance.
That sums it up pretty well. A whole life cycle.
It's been a fascinating deep dive. It really makes you appreciate writing in a new way.
Absolutely. Hey, thinking about all these powerful forces, economic, political, cultural, technological, that have shaped writing throughout history,
Yeah.
it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What about our current writing systems, especially now in such a rapidly changing digital age?
What is the future?
Are we just seeing another evolution, driven by new needs, new tech? Or could we be heading towards totally new ways of recording information, new forms of linguistic expression, forms that might eventually make our current alphabets and scripts seem, well, maybe a bit quaint, less central?
It's definitely something to think about, isn't it? Where is this journey heading next?
A really provocative thought to end on. Thanks for exploring all this with us. He gives you a whole new perspective on the words right in front of us, on the screen or page.